In New
West
Jersey,
Hall.
there lies an abandoned university dormitory, deserted since the 1970s after a mass disappearance that was never explained. Legends whisper that on nights when the moon wanes, faint laughter drifts through its corridors, mingling with the sound of footsteps wandering aimlessly in the dark.
This place gives me the creeps.
When a group
Come
of
on,
curious
we'll be
students chose to spend the night there, filming a documentary, they did not realize they had awakened the thing entombed within the walls. By morning, only their bodies remained, perfectly intact, yet their faces contorted by grotesque, frozen smiles. Those smiles were not their own. They bore the mark of Labubu, an ancient entity that sows silence through the horror of its grin. The car stopped before the abandoned dormitory, a silent monolith rising like cold stone amid a campus shrouded in mist. Emily Harris, 38, professor of folklore, stepped out. Her breath curled in white vapor as her eyes lifted to the dark windows, sealed behind cobwebs and dust. 20 years earlier, she had been a student here. Though the building had already been closed by the time she arrived, forever etched in memory as a forbidden place no one spoke of. With her was Mark Benson, 40, an independent filmmaker. He carried his camera with a mix of eagerness and unease. Behind them followed 3 students, restless with excitement and joining the project. They believed this trip was nothing more than a chance to document an urban legend. The whispers surrounding the mass disappearance of 1972. But Emily knew that within these walls lurked something far more dreadful. The wooden door shrieked as it gave way, releasing a flood of damp, frigid air. The hallway stretched forward, its peeling paint like rotting flesh. Each step they took reverberated, echoing into an endless void. Faded student portraits still clung to the walls, their smiles warped beneath a veil of dust, twisted into strange, frozen grimaces. That first night, they laid out their sleeping bags in a large room.
Students were found
Mark
intact.
positioned his
mouths
camera
stretched
toward the
into
corridor,
unnatural grins.
hoping to capture any
No
sign
signs
of
of
movement.
violence.
Emily sat by the window, sifting through old records of the case. In a yellowed newspaper clipping, her eyes caught a line stark in its brevity. Students were found intact, mouths stretched into unnatural grins. No signs of violence. Around midnight, as the others slept, Emily heard a sound. At first, she thought it was merely wind whistling through cracks. But when it came again, her body froze. It was not the wind. It was a steady, deliberate clicking, as though teeth were grinding just beside her ear. She held her breath, straining to listen. The sound seeped from within the walls, threading through the corridor, reverberating through the very bones of the building like a hidden pulse. Emily's gaze swept the darkness, and in the faint light, she swore she saw the cracks along the wall, bending, curving into the outline of an immense jaw slowly parting. The air thickened with the certainty of a presence in the hallway, watching, smiling, breathing with them. Emily clutched the papers in her hands, her mind sharp with one dreadful truth. This was no legend. They had awakened something. Nay, Sheikh. The next morning, pale light filtered weakly through the dust-choked windows, illuminating the desolate corridor. Emily opened her eyes, her chest still heavy from the night's strange symphony of sounds. She sat up, stepped out of her sleeping bag, and instantly felt the suffocating stillness. No soft snoring, no restless chatter of young students, only silence pressing against her eardrums like a weight. When she turned, her heart seized. On the cot in the corner, Rachel's body lay motionless. Her eyes were wide open, void of pain, yet her face was stretched into a grotesque smile. unnaturally long, her lips frozen in a hideous arc. No wounds, no blood. Simply life gone, leaving behind a flawless shell and a hollow grin. Mark rushed forward, panic in his movements, camera in hand. He tried to capture the scene, but when he played the tape back, the image fractured into streaks of black and white static. Only the sound remained intact. A jagged, repetitive clatter, sharp as bone against bone. The grinding of countless unseen jaws hidden deep within the walls. The two remaining students stood paralyzed, terror etched in their eyes. Emily forced herself to remain composed, though her hands trembled as memory clawed at her. The records from 1972 had spoken of deaths exactly like this. Bodies untouched, preserved as though in sleep, yet every face marred by that unmistakable smile. She knelt beside Rachel, staring at the twisted expression. That smile was not the girl's own. It belonged to something else, something that had used her features as a mask, a message to those who dared intrude. The room grew oppressive. From the ceiling, flakes of paint began to fall, revealing a network of hairline cracks spreading across the plaster. They bent and curved, intersecting until they resembled the outline of clenched teeth. Emily's breath caught. The building itself was changing, reshaping into the vast maw of something monstrous, and Rachel was only the beginning. In that moment, she understood. The dormitory was never abandoned. It was alive. It was smiling through the faces it had stolen, and they had only brushed the surface of the truth. Adi. Alous. A heavy silence weighed over the dormitory. Rachel's body had been shrouded beneath an old blanket, yet her frozen smile lingered in the minds of the others like a brand no one dared forget. The two remaining students whispered about leaving, but Emily forced them into calm. The blizzard outside had sealed every path. They were trapped. Survival depended on unearthing whatever secrets the building kept buried. Emily led the group into the basement. Darkness clung thickly to the air, their flashlights sweeping across splintered chairs and file cabinets smothered in dust. Amid the rot and debris, Emily found a leather-bound notebook, its cover torn and frayed. When she opened it, the stench of mold and ash rose, but the words within, trembling, uneven strokes, were still legible. It was the journal of a student from 1972, the sole survivor of that year's tragedy. The first entry made her breath catch. We heard laughter in our sleep. When I opened my eyes, my friends were smiling at me, but it was not their smile. They did not speak. They only sat there, waiting. The pages that followed spiraled into terror. Each night brought the sound of teeth gnashing within the walls. The writer described it as a choir of bone and enamel. One student vanished inside the bathroom, leaving behind only damp air and a mirror etched with a strange face, its grin stretching unnaturally from cheek to cheek. The final entries were broken, the ink warped by tears. I escaped, but when I looked back, they were all still there, motionless, their smiles frozen like masks. I know one day it will come for me, because even now, the grinding teeth echo in my ears every night. Mark filmed close-ups of each page, his face drained of color. The two students pressed into one another, whispering, unable to raise their heads. Emily finished reading, her chest tightening as though the basement itself were crushing in around her. The cracks in the walls here were not ordinary. They bent into curved arcs, converging like the joints of a vast, unseen smile. Then the familiar sound returned. The grinding of teeth, louder now, heavier, as though emanating from the journal itself. Emily snapped it shut, but the noise swelled, reverberating through the basement, circling them with a suffocating pulse. The flashlights flickered, then died. In the darkness, Mark muttered the name of one of the students, but only faint laughter replied. When the light returned, one of the two was gone. Only a backpack remained on the floor, its zipper torn open, and on the damp concrete, a slender curve had been etched, as though a new smile had just been carved into the world. Emily staggered, her heart hammering. She understood now. The journal was not merely a record. It was an invitation, and the fresh disappearance proved that the cycle of 1972 had begun again. The grinding no longer came in scattered bursts. It thundered all at once, as though hundreds of jaws were clenching around them. Emily dragged Mark and the last remaining student, Lisa, up from the basement. But when they emerged into the corridor, the dormitory was no longer the same. Cracks along the walls had split wider, curving into grotesque arcs that met and intertwined, stretching into endless, distorted smiles. Fluorescent bulbs flickered violently, then burst, shards falling like shattered teeth. Each step made the floor groan. The sound resonant like a lowered jaw, grinding against an unseen upper. Lisa sobbed, her trembling hand pointing toward the far end of the hall. Doors along both sides creaked open in unison. From within, blurred faces peered out, all of them smiling. No footsteps, no breath, only hollow figures, their frozen grins and vacant eyes fixed upon them. Mark raised his camera, desperate to capture proof, but the lens recorded only a single image, an immense set of teeth filling the frame. He stumbled back in horror. When he looked again with his own eyes, the figures were gone. The corridor stretched empty and endless, saturated with the metallic stench of blood. Emily clutched the journal tightly, searching for guidance. In the final entry, the survivor of 1972 had scrawled, "If you want to escape, you must return to the place where it first began to smile. But beware, the smile never closes." The common room, Emily whispered. It was where the students had once gathered, the heart of the dormitory. They raced up the shadowed stairwells. On each floor, the walls trembled, plaster crumbling like gums seeping blood. Overhead, cracks stretched into curving lips, drawing shut as if the entire building were preparing to grind them between colossal jaws. The common room stood open. Inside, the vast space yawned beneath a ceiling torn away, exposing the ashen sky. Yet the clouds had contorted into the form of a monstrous smile, upper and lower masses pressing down upon the structure. On the floor, desks and chairs were arranged in a perfect circle. At its center sat a fractured mirror, but the reflection it gave back was not their own. Instead, it revealed another room, brighter, filled with students sitting in silence, every one of them smiling. Among them, Emily recognized Rachel and the student who had only just vanished. They waved, their grins twisting, stretching impossibly wide. Lisa screamed and rushed forward, but Emily seized her arm and pulled her back. At that instant, the mirror splintered with a shriek, the sound of teeth grinding echoing through the chamber. Cracks radiated outward from the glass, racing across the walls, threatening to tear the building apart. Mark shouted, It's swallowing us. And it was true. The ceiling sank lower. The floor swelled upward, furniture and debris sliding into the widening void at the center of the room. A true mouth had taken shape, and they stood at the edge of its throat. Emily knew with terrifying clarity, unless they found a way to end the cycle, they would be consumed, their faces added to the endless, eternal smile. Ni? Oh. The common room shuddered violently. Cracks widened along the walls, bending into grotesque curves like sprawling mouths. Segments of concrete broke loose, crashing down with the sound of teeth being torn from bone. The dormitory itself was sealing shut around them. Mark clung to the camera, his hands trembling uncontrollably. "We have to break the mirror," he shouted. Lisa screamed, clutching her head, as the deafening grind of invisible jaws roared in her skull, driving her toward madness. Emily tightened her grip on the journal. The words returned to her mind. "If you want to escape, you must return to where it first began to smile." Her gaze fell upon the fractured mirror. It was the threshold, the origin, and the end. "Don't look at it," Emily cried, but too late. Lisa's eyes had already locked onto the faces within. On the other side of the glass, Rachel and the vanished students smiled back, their grins splitting wider, tearing toward their ears. Lisa's body trembled, then lurched forward into the circle of chairs. She hurled herself at the mirror and vanished, her form swallowed in an instant, leaving only a shrill, piercing laughter echoing in the chamber. Mark staggered backward, his face pale. "We can't escape. It wants us. It wants everyone to smile." Emily knew there was only one path left. She tore pages from the journal and scattered them around the mirror like a seal. The words, written in a desperate, trembling hand, ignited the moment they touched the ground. Green fire erupted, casting the chamber into an unholy glow. In that light, its true form was revealed. Not a person, nor a multitude, but the dormitory itself. Every wall was a gum, lined with teeth, every crack a bleeding fissure, every window an unblinking eye. The structure laughed with its entirety, its smile eternal and unyielding. Emily turned to Mark, her gaze steady. "One of us must remain to bind it. You must survive to tell them what waits here." Before Mark could protest, she hurled herself into the mirror, clutching the journal tight against her chest. The green blaze consumed her, devouring both her body and the glass. The room convulsed with a final thunderous gnash of teeth, and then fell silent. When Mark opened his eyes, the dormitory lay still. The cracks had vanished, the ceiling restored, the mirror reduced to a scatter of lifeless shards. Lisa, Rachel, the countless others, gone without trace. He stumbled outside. The sky was clear. The storm had lifted. Yet, within his ears, faint and insistent, lingered the grinding of unseen teeth, like a lullaby, both familiar and inescapable. Mark understood then. The loop had not ended. It merely waited, patient, for another smile to open it once more. "Ooh, ni nei, ban dao, pai." In the desolate countryside of the Midwest, a weathered radio station stands abandoned by the roadside, left to rot after a fire 20 years ago. Yet every midnight, the airwaves around the town carry a voice, a low, hollow broadcaster's tone, cold as static. He warns listeners to lock their doors, then begins reading a list of names. Names belonging to those long dead. And anyone who dares to listen through the entire program before sunrise disappears without a trace, as if pulled straight into the invisible currents of the broadcast. Daniel Carter drove his old car through the low Midwestern hills, the empty highway stretching on as if without end. Once, he had been a well-regarded investigative journalist, but in recent years, his reputation had faded. Assignments grew scarce. His last article had been rejected by the paper, and now he knew he had only one chance left. A story haunting enough to make waves, or he would vanish into obscurity forever. Rumors about the haunted radio station drifted through online forums and in scraps of gossip from the locals. It broadcasts every night. If you listen until the end, you never wake up again. Part of Daniel suspected it was just another urban legend, but another part hoped, if the strange phenomenon was real, it would be the story of his career. "You mean the station?" The woman at the counter hesitated, eyes darting as though afraid someone might overhear. "Don't go near it. People have died because of it. Don't be foolish enough to listen." When Daniel pressed her, she only shook her head, slammed the ledger shut, and refused to speak further. That silence only drew him deeper. He rented a modest room on the town's edge, where the elderly innkeeper warned him with the same half-whisper, "When night falls, don't turn on the radio." But in Daniel's suitcase, an old shortwave receiver already waited. That night, a little past 11:30, Daniel sat at a rickety wooden desk, slowly turning the knobs. Static crackled like rainfall. 11:58. At the stroke of midnight, the dial at 96.3 suddenly came through, unnaturally clear. A man's voice filled the room, deep and measured, sounding as though it belonged to no particular era. "Good evening, listeners. Tonight, stay inside, lock your doors. Out there, something waits." Daniel shuddered. The tone did not waver. It carried the weight of command. Then, the broadcast shifted. The voice began to read names, each spoken slowly, like tolling church bells. Mary Collins, Joseph Hale, Thomas Reed. Daniel scribbled them quickly into his notebook, his heartbeat quickening. The list stretched on for nearly 10 minutes. But then came one name that froze him in place. Henry Alden, the very man he had met earlier that afternoon at the general store, the one who had quietly warned him, "Don't go near it." The program ended abruptly with a long burst of static. Then silence. Daniel sat unmoving for hours, eyes locked on the radio, ears still echoing with that strange voice. He told himself it was only a hoax, a trick transmission, some elaborate prank. But deep down, a chill rooted itself in his bones. He had brushed against something that was never meant to be touched. At 3 a.m., Daniel finally closed his notebook. Tomorrow morning, he would find Henry Alden. If the man was still alive, then all of this was nothing more than superstition. But if not, it would mean the legend had already stepped out of the shadows, and Daniel had heard a warning whispered from the other side of death. The next morning, Daniel went to the wooden house where Henry Alden lived. The door was shut tight, curtains drawn, no light escaping from within. He knocked, calling Henry's name. Silence. An elderly neighbor across the street stepped out and shook his head slowly. "Mr. Alden, he hasn't been seen since last night. The door's still locked, but he's gone." The words chilled Daniel's spine. The death list was no joke. It carried some kind of power, a hidden hand erasing people from existence. He went to the town's small library to dig deeper. Faded newspapers told the story of the 1983 fire that destroyed the Dagwakshi X radio station. Every staff member on the night shift had perished. None escaped. Locals whispered that their ashes had merged with the radio waves, becoming the very thing that still echoed at midnight. By late afternoon, Daniel passed the old general store again. The woman from the day before looked at him with a mix of pity and dread. "You listened, didn't you?" she whispered. "Don't turn it on again. Once it speaks your name, your soul belongs to it." Before Daniel could ask more, she turned away quickly, as though afraid someone or something was listening. That night, in his motel room, Daniel could not resist the temptation. He switched on the radio, tuning carefully to 96.3 DOI. The announcer's voice returned, clear and haunting. "Tonight, stay inside. Listen well." The list began again. This time, the names were more familiar. Daniel recognized at least 3 people from town he had seen that very day. Between the pauses, faint, overlapping whispers seeped through, like dozens of voices weeping within the static. And at the end, the broadcaster let out a drawn, guttural laugh that froze Daniel's blood. The program ended. Silence filled the room once more. But Daniel knew it was only the surface. Beneath it, something was moving, waiting for the next night to call more names. He closed his notebook, his palms slick with sweat. Yet instead of retreating, his reporter's instinct drove him further. He had to go to the abandoned radio station. Only there could Daniel hope to uncover the source of this nightmare. City, Ali. The road leading to the abandoned radio station was overgrown with weeds and pitted with potholes, as if the entire town had conspired to erase it from memory. The 2-story concrete building sagged under a gray sky, its windows shattered, its antenna bent like brittle bones. Daniel parked, drew a deep breath, and stepped inside. Dust coated everything. The hallways were dark, the walls scarred with burns. At the end of the corridor lay the recording booth, its wooden door half charred, but still intact. Daniel swept his flashlight across the room. The old microphone still stood on the desk, layered in dust, as though waiting for someone to return. Scattered tapes littered the floor, many warped and blackened by fire. He picked up one of the few intact reels and slid it into the machine. A burst of static screeched, then gave way to broken sounds. Frantic cries for help, muffled sobbing, and suddenly a rasping laugh. The very same laugh Daniel had heard over the midnight broadcast. A shiver ran down his spine. The sounds were not merely recordings. They seemed to bleed through the present, echoing out of the darkness itself. He stopped the machine quickly, but his ears still rang with that unnatural resonance. Turning, his flashlight caught the back wall. Scrawled there in charred black letters were the words, "Whoever listens becomes part of the signal. Whoever joins the signal never returns." The writing was shaky, desperate. Daniel left the booth, heart hammering. In the adjacent storage room, he found a stack of burned personnel files, a roster of the night shift staff from 1983. Every name matched those he had already heard in the broadcasts. There was no longer any doubt. The announcer's voice was the echo of the dead. Outside, Daniel gulped the damp air, trying to shake off the suffocating weight. Yet the shadows pressing against the building seemed thicker, heavier. In the wind, he thought he heard whispers, fragments of voices overlapping, as though a crowd of unseen souls was still trapped within the station's scorched concrete walls. Daniel knew he had gone too far. And the most terrifying thought was this: the broadcast might not stop at calling other names. One night soon it might call his. Oh. The third night in town, Daniel sat before the old radio, the red glow of the clock reading 11:59. He had promised himself he would never listen again, yet his trembling hand still reached for the dial. The radio seemed to have its own gravity, an open, black doorway he could not resist. 12:0 door. The static cleared. The announcer's familiar voice filled the room, cold and resolute. Good evening, listeners. Tonight, the souls are ready. The list began. Each name rang out, stretched long like a funeral bell. Daniel scribbled in his notebook, but halfway through, the pen slipped from his hand. The voice slowed, paused. The silence pressed down like ice. Daniel Carter. He froze. His heart hammered against his ribs, sweat pouring down his face. For the first time, the broadcast had spoken a living name. His name. The name of a man sitting right here, hearing every syllable of his fate. The room shifted. Shadows expanded and contracted like breathing lungs. In the small mirror on the wall, Daniel's reflection vanished, replaced by the charred, hollow-eyed face of the announcer from decades past. The man's lips moved in perfect sync with the voice spilling from the radio. You have listened. You belong to us. Daniel screamed, hurling the radio to the floor. But the sound did not stop. The broadcast bled from the outlets, from the wires in the walls, even from the hiss of wind outside the window. The whole town had become a single, enormous speaker, and every whisper carried the same name, Daniel Carter. He bolted into the night, sprinting across the empty road toward the abandoned station. If there was a way out, it had to be at the source. But the sky above burned crimson, the moon casting its pale, deathly glow across the rooftops. In that light, Daniel saw figures staggering into the street, faces he recognized from the lists. They were no longer alive, but echoes of flesh and bone, murmuring in unison. You will broadcast with us. Daniel pushed harder, lungs aflame, but deep inside he knew the truth. Once his name had been spoken on the airwaves, the door home was already closed. Nai. Dai. Daniel burst through the scorched wooden doors of the radio station. The recording booth was swallowed in darkness, dust thick in the air. But on the desk, the old microphone glowed faintly, as if it had just been switched on. The transmitter light blinked red, in rhythm with his own pounding heart. I don't belong to you, he shouted, his voice ragged. But the words immediately echoed back through the speakers, distorted, delayed, broadcast live. He heard himself laughing, a hoarse, broken sound that warped into the announcer's voice. Daniel lunged at the microphone, trying to rip it free, but his hand stuck fast to the frozen metal. A searing current tore through him. Memories ripped loose, childhood faces, fragments of love, every moment of his life, sucked into the invisible hum of the airwaves. Outside the window, the figures gathered. They shuffled closer, hollow-eyed, their mouths moving in unison. Daniel Carter broadcast with us. Their chant merged with the static of the radio, a grotesque chorus of the damned. He fought, but the more he struggled, the less of him remained. His body blurred, bones and blood dissolving into vibration, fading into the signal. Daniel screamed one final time, but the cry did not leave his lips. Instead, it rang clear through the radio on the floor. Then silence. The microphone's glow died. Daniel was gone. Only his notebook remained on the desk. its last page smeared with sweat and trembling words. "If you hear your name, run, never stay." That midnight, on frequency 96.3, the announcer's voice returned. But this time, between the roll call of the dead, another voice joined in. Newer, younger, trembling at first, then steady. It was Daniel, his voice now part of the eternal broadcast. "Good evening, listeners. Tonight, lock your doors and listen." Outside, the sun would rise as always. The town would endure, but anyone who tuned their radio to 96.3 at midnight would hear Daniel reading names that would never end. And the signal would never die. "Ha, Kelly." In a forsaken graveyard of New England, no trees of wood take root. Instead, they rise from human bone, ribs twisting into skeletal branches, skulls swaying like pale, hollow fruit. Among them moves the gravekeeper, an ancient shadow, silently tending his garden of the damned. Each soul of the unfortunate, once sown, blossoms into another tree of bone, feeding the forest that should never have been. Nen Pasi. The fog of New England clung to the earth like a burial shroud, veiling the narrow path that wound up the hill where the old cemetery lay. Michael Hale, a man in his 40s, walked slowly, one hand gripping a weathered leather notebook. An archaeologist by trade, he had little patience for folklore. To him, this graveyard was nothing more than a forgotten relic of the 17th century. Before arriving, Michael had heard the villagers' strange warnings. They told him never to set foot on the hill after sunset. They whispered of pale figures gliding through the mist, of groans rising from beneath the earth, of trees that grew not from wood but from bone. He had laughed, dismissing their words as superstition woven from fear. But the suffocating silence here gnawed at his certainty. At the crest of the hill, Michael stopped before a gate of blackened iron, rusted and twisted. The carvings of crossed bones were nearly worn away. A stone tablet bore a fading Latin inscription, Hic silentis locantur. Here, the silent still speak. He pressed his hand against the gate, the chill bit like metal drawn straight from ice. Inside stretched a garden of the dead. Tombstones leaned and fractured, their inscriptions lost to moss. Weeds choked the soil, yet here and there, pale shapes jutted from the earth like limestone shards. Michael crouched and realized they were fragments of bone, disturbingly clean, as though placed there deliberately rather than left to decay beneath the soil. Michael opened his notebook and began to record everything. The shape of graves, the weathered symbols, even the position of the bones. Then came a creak, sharp, deliberate. Michael's head snapped up. Across the cemetery, near the largest tomb, stood a figure. The fading light sketched a gaunt old man with a hunched back, a long coat trailing the ground, and a rusted spade in his hand. He did not move, yet his sunken eyes seemed fixed on Michael from within the hollow dark of their sockets. Michael swallowed hard. He had not expected a caretaker. Relief should have come, but instead, a cold shiver clawed its way down his spine. The old man's body did not shift, yet the creak came again, like a gate closing of its own accord. Michael turned. The iron gate stood shut behind him, silent and immovable, as if it had never opened at all. Ah! Michael instinctively stepped back as the old man advanced. His black coat dragged across the wet grass, with a sound like bones grinding together. The hollows of his eyes were deep and sunken, his stare pressing against Michael's chest as if trying to pierce straight through him. "Night has fallen," the man rasped, his voice corroded like rusted iron. "This place does not belong to the living." Michael forced himself to remain steady. He raised the worn leather notebook, his tone firm. "I'm an archaeologist. I'm here only to survey these old graves. I'll cause no trouble." A crooked smile bent the old man's face. "Survey?" he echoed, tapping the head of his spade against the ground 3 times. The sound reverberated hollow and strange, not the thud of solid earth, but the echo of a void beneath. This soil does not hold history. It feeds. A chill ran through Michael, but pride in his profession pushed him forward. "If you are the caretaker, then surely you understand the archaeological value of this place. Some of these stones date back to the 17th century, perhaps even earlier." The old man bowed his head, his trembling hand stroking the shaft of the spade. "My name is Elias. I have tended this ground longer than anyone remembers. Those stones tell you nothing. What truly lives here does not rest above the earth." The wind stirred, carrying a rustling like countless hands scratching beneath the soil. Michael froze, his heart hammering. Through the grass, he glimpsed pale shapes, finger bones, writhing upward, retreating just as quickly. He blinked, and they were gone. Only the grass swayed. Elias watched him still, his lips moving as though in prayer. "You should not remain past dark. After sunset, the soil hungers." Michael drew a sharp breath, etching the words into memory, though his rational mind refused surrender. "I need only 1 night of study. Tomorrow morning, if you wish, I'll be gone." Elias regarded him in silence, then let out a low, broken laugh that cracked like brittle bone. "1 night, more than enough for the earth to notice you." He turned and shuffled deeper among the graves, his shadow dissolving into the leaning stones. Michael thought to call after him, but his throat tightened, no sound emerging. The headstones around him seemed to lean closer, their shadows tangling together like skeletal arms reaching outward. By the time the last light drained from the sky, Michael stood alone, the leather notebook open in his shaking hands. In the suffocating dark, only the scratch of his pen on paper could be heard. Yet beneath the damp soil, another sound stirred, an endless rasping, as though hundreds of skeletons breathed in rhythm with him. "Ah, noir." Night fell over New England as swiftly as if some unseen hand had snuffed out a vast lantern in the sky. The cemetery drowned beneath a heavy curtain of darkness, lit only by a pale crescent moon, its glow spilling across the crooked stones. Michael stood frozen, pen halted above the page. A strange silence pressed down. No insects, no owls, only the restless wind spiraling through ancient crypts. Then the sound returned. At first it was no more than the patter of pebbles, but it grew, grinding, splintering, the brittle crack of something breaking far beneath the soil. Michael staggered back, eyes locked on the grass at his feet. The earth swelled upward, as though something beneath clawed for release. A sharp snap split the night. From the ground, a shard of bone jutted skyward, pale and glistening under the moonlight. Another followed, curved like a branch. Horror clamped Michael's chest as he realized. Ribs. The branches bent and twisted, joints snapping into place, forming the grotesque outline of a tree clawing its way toward the sky. Not one, dozens. All around him, the earth quivered. Skulls burst from the grass like fruit. hollow eyes turned toward him. The graveyard writhed, birthing bone trees that groaned as they rose, their skeletal limbs grinding together with a sickening chorus. Michael's breath caught as he stumbled back toward the largest tomb. In the weak moonlight, he saw what made it worse. Many of the trees still clung to tatters of clothing, shoelaces, scraps of fabric, even the glint of a wristwatch. These were not relics of centuries past. They were the remains of the missing. The wind howled, carrying with it a sound more dreadful than any gale. The broken murmur of countless voices. Michael strained to listen, heart pounding, and heard them. Help us! Release us! The earth devours. His legs trembled, but terror chained his eyes to the sight before him. The bone forest climbed higher, trunks weaving into a pale lattice, skulls dangling like rotten fruit, clacking against one another in the cold air. Some rose 10 feet high, their limbs creaking as though eager to embrace him. The cemetery had become a living garden of the damned. Michael turned to flee, but the ground at his back split open too, bone shoots sprouting and snapping shut around him. He was trapped, hemmed in by dozens of reaching trunks. A shudder cut down his spine as one tree nearby bent toward him. Its ribs groaned, splintering as they spread open like fingers ready to seize their prey. The air thickened with the stench of damp earth and the sickly sweetness of rotting flesh. Michael gagged, bile rising in his throat. With a strangled cry, he hurled himself toward the massive tomb at the cemetery's heart. Its stone door hung ajar beneath the moonlight, waiting. He didn't hesitate. He plunged inside and slammed the heavy slab shut behind him. Darkness swallowed him whole. The silence pressed so deep he could hear only the hammering of his own blood. And then, from the depths of the crypt, a whisper unfurled, long and serpentine. You have entered the garden. Michael stiffened, ice coursing through his veins. In that moment he understood. He was no longer an observer. He was part of the soil now. Me, I see. Inside the stone tomb, the darkness was thick as a drowned sea. Michael pressed his back against the heavy door, breath ragged, ears still echoing with the brittle crack of bones outside. The air was rank with mold and the faint iron tang of dried blood, choking his lungs until he thought he might suffocate. He flicked on his flashlight. Its trembling beam cut across damp stone walls slick with moss. But it was not only stone. The surface was carved over and over, a mad tapestry of names etched in desperate haste, hundreds of them, clawed in Latin, Old English, and symbols Michael had never seen before. They sprawled like curses left behind by those who vanished. At the tomb's far end stood an altar. Upon it lay a cracked ceramic vessel brimming with fragments of bone, pale and granular like salt. From the floor, black roots wormed upward, coiling around the remains, feeding on them. Michael staggered back, chilled with realization. The earth here did not merely devour, it cultivated. A rasping voice rose from the shadows behind him. You've seen it now. Michael spun, light quivering across Elias, the gravekeeper, stepping forth from the dark. He still clutched his rusted spade, his coat dragging low, but the beam revealed something worse. His skin was fissured with cracks, in places peeling back to expose the bone beneath. Beneath that wrinkled husk, Elias was little more than another living tree of bone. What are you? Michael stammered. Elias chuckled, the sound sharp as snapping ribs. I am only the sour. You saw the garden outside. The soil thirsts for souls. It devours the dead, but without a hand to tend them, they would wither. I feed them. I watch over them. Michael trembled, yet curiosity forced the words from him. And the missing? They are your trees as well. Elias inclined his head slowly. The wanderers, the sinners, even the curious, like you. Any who set foot upon this land become seed for the garden. That is the covenant. The earth grants me existence, and in return, I plant. Call me monster, if you will. I have only kept my vow. Michael backed away, heart pounding. I can't stay here. Elias advanced, his shadow stretching across the walls, carved with the names of the dead. You are already here. The gate behind you will never open again. The earth has recognized you, and it craves you for its next tree. The flashlight shook in Michael's grip, its beam catching Elias's face. His eyes were no longer eyes at all, only gaping hollows. From his mouth writhed slender bone roots, squirming like parasites. Elias raised the spade, its handle blackened, its blade glinting cold. I do not kill you, he whispered. I plant you. The ground beneath Michael split apart, jagged cracks yawning wide. Skeletal hands thrust up, clutching at his ankles. He screamed, struggling, but the grip only tightened, dragging him inch by inch toward the soil. In that frantic instant, clarity struck him. He had only two paths: surrender to the earth's hunger, or shatter this vile covenant, whatever price it demanded, even if it cost his own life. And Elias stood above him, smiling faintly, the way a farmer smiles as the seed finally sinks into the waiting ground. Nah. Inan, Umaya. Michael screamed, wrenching at his legs as skeletal hands clamped tighter, dragging him down. The pull tore his skin open, blood spilling into the soil, hungrily swallowed as if poured onto smoldering ash. Despair crushed his chest, suffocating every breath. No, I don't belong here. He clawed at the stone wall, desperate to resist the earth's hunger. Elias only watched, hollow eyes sinking deeper into shadow, his voice calm and resonant, like a litany whispered at the end of time. You belong to the garden the moment you set foot here. Your blood will enrich the soil. Your bones will bloom into new branches. Do not resist. Let the earth claim you. Michael's frantic gaze darted to the altar. The fractured clay urn lay there, brimming with bone dust, its surface tangled in writhing black roots that trembled like starving veins. A thought pierced his panic. If the garden's existence was bound to that vessel, breaking it might sever the pact. With the last of his strength, he lunged, clutching a jagged stone from the tomb wall. The skeletal hands gripped harder, pulling him waist-deep into the ground, but Michael roared, hurling the rock with all his fury at the urn. It shattered with a violent crack. Fragments flew, bone dust burst into the air like a pale storm. From beneath the earth rose a shriek, thousands of voices howling as one, an unholy choir of souls torn free. The skeletal hands around him convulsed, then loosened their grip. Elias's roar split the chamber, his voice breaking for the first time. You fool! You do not understand what you've done. The tomb quaked. The ceiling split, stones raining down. Michael scrambled free, dragging himself toward the sealed door. His hand pressed against the cold slab, then froze. His fingers were no longer flesh, but bare white bone, the skin shriveled and peeling away. He looked down in horror. His legs too were changing, skin splitting open, bones stretching outward like gnarled roots. The price of breaking the covenant was not freedom, but transformation. A seed, stronger, hungrier, was taking root. Elias writhed in the collapsing dark, yet laughter rasped from his withering throat. Did you think you escaped? No. You have only taken my place. Michael's scream curdled into the cracking of bone. His body bent and warped, limbs driving deep into the soil, veins hardening into root, joints twisting into branches. His mind dimmed, hollowed, until only the hunger remained, spreading, devouring, eternal. By dawn, the graveyard stood silent, cloaked in mist. The bone trees towered motionless, their pale branches gleaming like ivory. At the garden's heart rose a new trunk, its limbs stark white, and from them dangled a broken pen and a blood-stained notebook. The garden of bone had claimed another, and it would never cease to grow. Known.
With the last of his strength, he lunged, clutching a jagged stone from the tomb wall. The skeletal hands gripped harder, pulling him waist-deep into the ground, but Michael roared, hurling the rock with all his fury at the urn. It shattered with a violent crack. Fragments flew, bone dust burst into the air like a pale storm. From beneath the earth rose a shriek, thousands of voices howling as one, an unholy choir of souls torn free. The skeletal hands around him convulsed, then loosened their grip. Elias's roar split the chamber, his voice breaking for the first time. "You fool! You do not understand what you've done." The tomb quaked, the ceiling split, stones raining down. Michael scrambled free, dragging himself toward the sealed door. His hand pressed against the cold slab, then froze. His fingers were no longer flesh, but bare white bone, the skin shriveled and peeling away. He looked down in horror. His legs too were changing, skin splitting open, bones stretching outward like gnarled roots. The price of breaking the covenant was not freedom, but transformation. A seed, stronger, hungrier, was taking root. Elias writhed in the collapsing dark, yet laughter rasped from his withering throat. Did you think you escaped? No. You have only taken my place. Michael's scream curdled into the cracking of bone. His body bent and warped, limbs driving deep into the soil, veins hardening into root, joints twisting into branches. His mind dimmed, hollowed, until only the hunger remained, spreading, devouring, eternal. By dawn, the graveyard stood silent, cloaked in mist. The bone trees towered motionless, their pale branches gleaming like ivory. At the garden's heart rose a new trunk, its limbs stark white, and from them dangled a broken pen and a blood-stained notebook. The garden of bone had claimed another, and it would never cease to grow. Now,